Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Budget on a Budget, Navigating Financial Conversations. As we continue our theme of remodeling for the month of August, I have the pleasure of introducing today's speaker, Elizabeth Lord Levitt, CMKBD and Principal Designer of Elizabeth P. Lord Residential Design. With that said, Elizabeth, please take it away.
Thank you so much, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I have spoken at KBIS before, and when I was asked to do this webinar, it was really exciting to be able to reach a broader audience. Just a reminder, you do get CEU credits for this, and so you'll find that information in the chat. You get zero 0.01 CEUs for this. So I'm so happy you're here. I'm so grateful, and I hope that you find a lot of beneficial information in this. And if you just leave with a small nugget, then I hope I did my job. So let's start. Budgeting on a budget, navigating financial conversations with Built for Design Residential Academy. So Built for Design provides consulting, training, and construction education that's curated specifically for residential interior designers and real estate professionals. As Alicia said, my name is Elizabeth Lord Levitt. I am a designer here based in Denver, Colorado. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I started in custom furniture and moved into more design build and now more construction-based design work. I have a master's degree in real estate and construction management from the University of Denver. I am a CMKBD and a CLIP certified designer, and I just recently completed a Women in Leadership program through Yale University. I'm the principal designer of Elizabeth P. Lord Residential Design, and I'm the founder of Built for Design Residential Academy. I also hold a Colorado real estate broker's license, and I'm an ambassador for the She Built Foundation. If you don't know about She Built, I would highly suggest looking it up. So the agenda for today, why budget conversations matter. They matter a ton, and we can't do our job if we don't know budgets, right? Budget conversation challenges, we'll address some challenges and then some solutions. We're going to go over budget mindset and dialogue, certain verbiage you can use to try to educate your clients, and then tips and tools for client education when it comes to talking about budget. So I love to, when I present, I love to do it live, and I love to do it primarily in person because I really love client interaction or client-student interaction. So I guess this would just be a question if anyone would be willing to add to the chat. Why do budget conversations matter? Like, why is that important for us as designers to have these conversations? If anyone is willing to share in the chat. Set expectations 1,000%, so you don't put your client in debt. Yes, that too. Budget conversations matter because ultimately for us to do our job, to be an advocate for them and be an asset and an ally for them through their project, we have to know their budget. Budgets are just as important as getting the right measurements. It's just as important as knowing the client's aesthetic when it comes to their spaces. So, what are the benefits of having these budget conversations? Well, for a client, we establish trust and transparency. When a client feels vulnerable and they share that budget, it's kind of a weight off their shoulders, right? It's an opportunity for them to kind of share something that's sensitive. It's a lot of money they're investing in their biggest investment, which is their home. And so giving that information to you starts to establish trust and transparency. When designers know a budget, they can align their creative vision with the financial reality. What is the point of designing if we design something that never comes to fruition, right? So our goal is to know that budget means that we can design to that budget. And then knowing that budget, we can work together with the client to make those educated decisions about their financial investment. Well, we should invest a little more here, but we can maybe not spend as much here, and that helps us stay within that ballpark. What are the benefits of the project if everybody knows the budget? Well, it holds the client, the contractor, and the designer accountable. If everybody knows what the client wants to spend, then everyone is working towards that main goal. It prevents scope creep. I mean, how often as designers do we find that during electrical rough-in, clients are like, while you're here, can you put in those inline speakers? Or while you're here, could you put in a new stair rail? Let's look at that. If everybody knows the budget, then everyone can set those expectations of this is the scope that we originally created for this budget. If we are going to go outside of that scope, that'll be an increase of cost. How do you feel about that? Does this budget align with adding these additional costs? And then the ability to pivot with guidance when unexpected costs arise. this is remodeling, right? And there's a lot of stressors that come with that. And oftentimes we open walls. I was at a project yesterday where my clients had bought the house 4 months ago. They pulled up the floor and there was black mold everywhere, in addition to termite damage, extensive. And they didn't know that when they bought it. They wanted to do a kitchen remodel. And so unfortunately, these unexpected costs do arise when it comes to remodeling. And so they need to be able to have a contingency fund. But if everybody knows this budget, contractors can then help and say, it looks like we have to fix all of this. We will have to then make concessions elsewhere to make sure that we're still within your budget. Okay, so let's get into budget conversation challenges. Here are a couple challenges that I find when I'm talking to clients, but please feel free to add it to the chat if you see more, or if you know more, if you've experienced more. The first one is that clients are super hesitant to disclose their full budget. They feel like if they disclose their full budget, we will take advantage of that. We will spend it down to the last penny, and we can't wait to do it. But ultimately, we need to know that budget to be able to design for them. Misunderstanding of design and project costs. My girlfriend did her kitchen for X amount of money. I did my last kitchen in Kansas for this much. I've moved to Denver. It's probably the same. It is not. HGTV told me I could do my kitchen for this amount. They don't understand what things cost and the reality of what those financial implications are. So that's a challenge when it comes to budgets. Fear of limiting creative options. How often is it where we have clients that are like, well, I don't really want to give you a budget. I want to see what you can do. Well, let me be clear with you. In a small kitchen, that could be $100,000, but I could also make it $500,000. So it really doesn't matter what the cost of the kitchen is. It really matters what a client is willing to spend. And then there's the emotional attachment to unrealistic expectations. There's a Pinterest board or a house board of a primary bathroom in a 10,000 square foot house, and it's stunning. And they've used all high-end, materials, and a client loves the look of it. But the reality is, in a hall bath, that scale isn't going to be right, and that budget probably doesn't apply. And so we need to be able to adjust those expectations for clients when it comes to budgeting and setting those expectations. So we're going to dive deeper into these, but this is just a slight overview of some solutions when we're talking about budget in these budget conversations. When it comes to budget, you position yourself as a problem solver. If you know the budget, then you can help them, right? You're not taking advantage of them, you are helping them. You want to emphasize value, not just cost, right? So I think if we did this, you would get a bigger return on your investment if we could add just a little more here. Guiding clients through smart choices. When it comes to budget, they don't know what things cost. And so ultimately, we want to be able to advise them and educate them without overwhelming them. Okay, so let's dive in. So some solutions when it comes to budget conversations. You want to position yourself as a problem solver. Approach each budget conversation with confidence and empathy, and really tell them you're there to help them, right? You're there to help them bring this beautiful kitchen to life. And if you don't know the budget, then it's really hard for you to help because it doesn't hold you accountable as a designer designing a space to that budget. It doesn't hold anybody accountable. So one of the dialogues or conversations that could be had is to help kind of emphasize this problem solver mentality is to say, if you share your desired investment amount with me, I can design to that budget, right? And so when you kind of share it that way, sometimes clients see, oh, they're there to help me. They're there to help bring my vision to life. Emphasize value, not just cost. So when you're doing these, first meetings, right? And you're talking to your client about the wants and needs of these spaces, and you're discussing the financial impact of what the client hates about their their old kitchen. Oh, it's too small, it's too cramped. I have a big family, we all want to cook together. As a designer, you may want to suggest some things that aren't just beautiful, but functional, right? They add a lot of value to the space. So, for example, adding a prep sink might create more versatile workspaces in the kitchen for you and your family to cook together. And although that's a financial impact and it's an added cost, if it's a big enough kitchen, your ROI on that could be tenfold, right? Because your value of having your family in your kitchen and being able to all cook together in different work areas, you have to try to not just to talk about cost, but also value. Guiding clients through smart choices. So we want to advise clients that the two biggest things that impact budget is scope of work and material selection. And so clients don't often associate those things, right? We can control a lot of their budget if we don't choose high-end materials in that same space. So the scope of work and the material selections can ultimately affect their investment considerably. So I like to make the conversation go something like this. If you want to take that wall down, we may not be able to move that sink. How do you feel about that? And they'll say, well, I want to move the sink, but I also want to take the wall down. Well, I think that scope of work doesn't apply to your budget. So all of a sudden, money appears, right? Clients all of a sudden find a way to make things happen. So you really have to educate them on you can have this, but maybe not that. And then they can make the decision on if they're willing to spend that. Educate without overwhelming. This is a big one because clients get very overwhelmed when it comes to budget and budget conversations. I like to approach it as finding solutions to any type of problem and then saying the problem and then giving them the solutions at the same time. So for me, I find conversations like this. When you've gone shopping for countertops and a client falls in love with a quartzite, level 7 slab, and we were really priced out like a medium quartz product, the conversation could go something like this. Countertop option 1 would be X amount. So we'll need to offset the cost and select a less expensive backsplash. How do you feel about that? A client can say, oh, no, I want both. Okay, well, then we'll need to increase the budget. But ultimately, letting them have the control over where they spend their money, it doesn't necessarily then put it on you. You're making them make that decision, and you're helping them by providing them decisions to make educated decisions for their budget. So it's incredibly helpful to give them solutions and be really transparent in what things can cost, and then let them decide. It's their home and their budget. It's just us facilitating what to expect, through this process. Okay, so let's get a little bit into budget mindset and dialogue. Budget mindset, a lot of it comes from our internal, personal, and possibly negative beliefs about money, how we were raised. Did you often hear money doesn't grow on trees? The value of the dollar. These are the things that I feel like can put you at a disadvantage when you're talking to a client, because that is your personal mindset about money, right? A car, I don't want to buy a car. The car, I don't slimy. I don't want to talk about money with someone. It's uncomfortable, right? But ultimately, these are your negative beliefs. These are not a belief that is in reality in that moment. You are there to help. And so talking about budget is just as important as taking the measurements for the space. So what I really like, what I would say is, when you're talking about money, try not to allow your personal and negative beliefs about money, especially about yourself. So let's say you create this beautiful estimate and you've line itemed everything and it's adding, and you look at the bottom and you go, oh my gosh, that is so big. There's no way they're going to pay for that. I wouldn't pay that much for myself. You have to see the value that you bring to a client's project. It's huge. And so you may not pay for yourself, but someone will. Just like we pay for lawyers and car mechanics to do their job, someone will pay you for that to do your job. And so don't limit yourself in what you are providing to a client, because you add so much value to a project. But take out your negative mindset about money and then allow this budget conversation to be very organic and very natural. So let's reframe your mindset. You're there to help. So you need to know the budget. That's the only way you can help. Because like I said, and as a designer, we all know that same small kitchen could be $100,000. It could be $500,000. If we don't know that budget, we can't help these clients bring it to fruition. When we're talking about budget, don't act desperate or shy when asking for the budget. Don't come off as sheepish or don't make eye contact. This is a conversation that has to be had. And although you might find it uncomfortable, if we can reframe the mindset and we can look at it through the lens of, I need to help you do this. I'm very excited to, but I need to know your budget. It won't come off that way. You want to stay calm and empathetic and confident when talking about budget. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some of the ways that I work with my clients and when we talk about budget. So you go and you do your first meeting and they talk about their scope of work, and these clients are showing you endless Pinterest photos and you're like, yep, I understand. Sounds good. That budget question is the next question you have to ask. So here's how I address it. Based on the scope of work that we've walked through today, is there an investment amount that you feel comfortable with spending on this project? That's very conversational, right? It doesn't come off as, what is your budget? That feels very harsh and it feels a little aggressive. When you can say one, investment instead of budget, it means that you are both in line and hoping to invest in their home, right? You're both aligned in that. The second thing is when you can put the word comfortable in your sentence, they subconsciously get comfortable, right? And so all of a sudden, it just feels like a very normal conversation versus what is your budget? You can say, based on the scope of work, is there an investment amount that you feel comfortable with spending for this project? It just takes the edge off of how this conversation goes. Are there areas you'd be willing to splurge or save? This is a great question when it comes to budgets because you will find that some clients prioritize some things over others, and you'd be surprised, right? I am willing to spend for that quartzite countertop. Maybe I'll spend the weekend doing the painting myself, right? Or maybe I'll do the demo work myself, which is not a great suggestion, but sometimes that happens. I think that with clients, they are willing to work with you, to a certain extent. But, they may say, I don't need custom cabinets. I really don't. I don't need high-end appliances. But what I really want is, this custom hood. So those are the things that you can start to evaluate what the priorities are for the client. It can be super helpful when it comes to budget. And then I love this question. How long do you see yourself living here? This is not an outright budget question, but it does give you guidance when it comes to understanding a client's mindset around what they want to invest in their home. So if they say, I probably, I don't know, 3 to 5 years when the kids leave for college, right? Then that helps you provide enough information that to say, hey, if you're only going to be here for 3 to 5 years, here's some suggestions I would make that maybe could help with the budget. We don't have to do custom kitchen cabinets. This is not your forever home. Let's invest in the next home and make this home beautiful and versatile and appeal to a big demographic of buyers when you take it to market. But ultimately, we don't need to go crazy with budget here. This is a great way to build trust and confidence with a client and also understand kind of where their mindset is around budget. Okay. All right. So this is an initial conversation example. What I like about this is how often this conversation goes when I talk about budget. So I'll say after a long walkthrough and scope of work discussion and Pinterest board slideshow, I'll say, can you share with me an investment amount that you feel comfortable with spending on this project? And 99% of the time, the client will respond, well, I don't know what a kitchen costs, right? How often does that happen? And they don't. They're an accountant. They're an engineer. They're a nurse practitioner. Why would they know what a kitchen costs? They don't need to know. That's why they've hired you. But I like to say to them, totally understand. Yes, I don't know why you would know what a kitchen costs. Let me ask you a question. What does a car cost? And the client will say, well, what does a car cost? Well, what kind of car? And I'll say, well, what kind of kitchen? Do you want the Ferrari of kitchens or do you want the Fiat of kitchens, right? It has nothing to do what a kitchen costs. It has to do with what a client is willing to spend. Because again, in that same footprint, I could do $100,000, I could do a $500,000 kitchen. So it doesn't matter what a kitchen costs. What matters is what a client is willing to spend and invest in their home. So once they kind of understand where you're coming from and that you need to know their budget because you can design to a budget, they will share their budget. And I always, another way to say it would be like, can you share in round numbers? I don't need to know down to the penny what someone has saved. It's more about, is there a range that you're comfortable with spending? You don't have to tell me the exact amount. So oftentimes they'll share, okay, well, we probably have around $100,000 to spend. I like to say, that's a really great investment. Thank you for sharing that. Because ultimately, you've had to drag it out of them. And it's really vulnerable. And, sometimes it can make people uncomfortable. So I like to validate and say, thank you for sharing that. That's a great investment amount. That's a lot of money, right? And then instead of saying, well, I think your kitchen's going to cost this, I always like to use third-party stories. I did a kitchen that was a similar scope to this, and I did it about a couple months ago, and we came in around 150, sometimes close to 200, depending on what they ended up doing. Is that a number you feel comfortable with spending? And I feel like clients then don't feel as attacked when you basically are telling them their budget's too low, right? For a similar scope of work for a project I just did, we were a little closer to 150 to 200. Was that a number you would feel comfortable with spending? And a client can weigh that option because oftentimes they've given you a lowball number just to tell you a number. And they may say, yeah, we could probably do 150, but wouldn't want to go up to 200. And you're like, absolutely, I absolutely understand. I think for that investment amount, I think we could do the kitchen, but we probably couldn't do all the hardwood floors and the powder room for that. How do you feel about that? And then they can start to see where the scope of work is completely attributed to the budget. And they'll go, well, I want the powder room. Well, I want the hardwoods. Well, that's no problem. We can all want things, but we need to be able to pay for them. And so with the conversations that we have with clients, we want it to be very conversational. We do not want it to feel like we're judging them for a small amount of money that they've, invested or they've saved for their dream kitchen. So for me to validate their budget, to have a third party story instead of saying, I think your kitchen's going to be closer to 150. You can say, I just did a project with a similar scope of work. We came in around 150. How do you feel about that? And that also gets them talking. How do you feel about that? And then you can say, okay, well, I think if 150 is your drop dead, we have to be really, really conscious of the materials we choose. And I also really think that we could invest in some areas, but we'll have to make really conscious decisions about materials in other areas. Okay? All right, here we go. So oftentimes we may write a beautiful estimate and we send it off to the client and we're like, yes, I really think I'm going to get this one or whatnot. And you'll get the response of, I found someone who will do the project cheaper. Okay? Don't argue and justify yourself. You have tremendous value that you provide to your projects. Do not undermine yourself. Never, ever adjust your price for somebody else. Because the minute that you give in and say, okay, yeah, I'll drop my hourly for this, or I only take this percentage of markup, they will then start to try to get you to change your business models throughout the entire project. So you set those expectations from the beginning. This is how I run my business. This is my hourly rate. This is my fixed price. This is how I work. Never argue or justify. Never lower your price, and never take it personal. Okay? It was not for you. That is a red flag that is a red flying flag for you. Don't take it personal. It wasn't the right fit for you. It's a right fit for somebody else. Let them deal with that. So here's how I would respond to that in regards to if it was an email or even on the phone. I absolutely understand, and I thank you for the opportunity to bid your project. I'm so sorry our estimates didn't align with your investment amount. If anything changes and you aren't receiving the customer service and quality you are expecting, please feel free to reach out. Okay? That's not you having to justify your estimate. It also puts a little nugget of doubt in their head that what you could have provided was going to be better, right? And all of a sudden, it's, they may have that thought through their project when their project, the cheaper option, isn't going so great. And they realize that you were worth that, and you were worth that investment and that time and that energy. So never argue and justify your price. Stand firm. You are valued in what you do. Never lower your price and never take it personal. Okay. Budget tips and tools. So here are a couple of things that I use when it comes to educating clients on budget. Sometimes the verbiage, it just doesn't always come across or isn't articulated, or, clients just glaze over, as they often do after you've met with them for an hour and you're trying to talk to them and they're maxed out for their comprehension that day. There are some tangible things that I like to use to kind of validate and show budgets. So this is a wonderful exercise. And I do this often with clients who I believe might have too small of a budget for a scope of work. And I'd like to educate them as to why I think that. I think just saying that sometimes, it may not come off the right way. But what I like to say is $100,000, that's a ton of money. Thank you for sharing that. Let's do a little exercise just to kind of line item some of the bigger items that are going to be a part of your project And then we can see where we end up. Okay. So design, engineer, and permit fees, that's 8 to 10% of a project cost. Okay. Cabinets, your biggest investment on any project, you're at $30,000 for this scope of work. Let's say you're standing in their kitchen. I think appliances is probably going to be around 15,000 for all the packages that you want. Flooring, yeah, we want to do LVT throughout the first floor. You're probably around $7,000. Countertops, yeah, you probably need 2 slabs, probably around $10,000. Plumbing and electrical fixtures, well, you wanted to add the front entry chandelier and the 2 sconces up the stairs and then the dining room chandelier in addition to the pendants. You're probably looking at around $7,000. Backsplash and paint, you don't have that much backsplash, but you did want to paint that 2-story family room, so maybe $5,000. And then you want a little bit of a contingency fund just in case something happens. You fall in love with something that's a little more expensive, or you find dry rot or, like I said, termites. This can be a way to have a little bit of a slush fund for those expenses. Okay, so now we're at $94,000. We haven't hired a contractor. We don't have millwork in there, windows and doors, right? So clients need to see how different line items add up to be able to fully understand where their investment is going. And so this can be a really wonderful exercise for them. You can write it on graph paper as you're standing there. You could provide a sample estimate, something like this, and have it laminated or whatnot or on an iPad so you can kind of show them, hey, this is how it would break down for a kitchen budget of $100,000. And then they can really see, well, I really wanted that high-end range. That probably isn't going to fit into that appliance budget. I really like this exercise as well. So when it comes to the material analysis and talking about budgets, the same bathroom could have a good, better, best when it comes to materials. So like I said, someone might have a beautiful picture of a primary bathroom, and the primary bathroom's in a 10,000 square foot house with floor to ceiling marble everywhere, right? Well, that's probably not feasible for a smaller bathroom with a lower budget. And so sometimes there's great ways to create an exercise where you could do the same bathroom with granite countertops, pine or, ash wood cabinets and chrome hardware. A better option would maybe be a quartz countertops with oak cabinets and brushed nickel. Or the best option might be quartzite countertops, walnut custom cabinets, and the Lux Gold finish, right? And that helps clients understand that in the same square footage of a space, it could be a good, better, best scenario of where do you fall in line with where you want to invest, right? Or if we want marble floor to ceiling, we're probably in the best category, which means you're going to be spending a lot more. In the good category, we can make some really great choices and make it look beautiful. We just can't use some of the higher end materials that we may like to use in the past. Okay, when it comes to another exercise, this is kitchen scope. I really like this because it really helps clients kind of visualize what they could be getting for certain budgets as they stand in their hideous kitchens, right? So I'll say, here's how this would work. If we just wanted to paint your cabinets and we wanted to do new countertops, new appliances, new backsplash, I think a cosmetic remodel would probably be $25,000 to $40,000. And they'll say, absolutely not. This is not what I want. I'm not going to spend $40,000 on a kitchen I don't like. I hear you. That's absolutely fine. A pull and replace option would mean we pull everything out and everything you get is new coming back into the space. But at the end of the day, we really can't move anything around. The sink's got to stay there. The range has got to stay there. We can't take that wall down. This is just a pull and replace with new. Well, I really wanted to take that wall down and I wanted to move the sink into the island and put the range on the exterior wall. Well, that's more of a custom investment. And that means it's new everything, new layout, structural changes. And that is where they can start to see where the scope of work really affects ultimately kind of where their budget lands, right? So if you just say, I think $40,000 is a lot of money for your kitchen remodel. Here's what I think we could do for $40,000. We could paint the cabinets and do new countertops. And clients are going to say, well, I would like new cabinets. And you're like, I don't think we could do that for $40,000, unfortunately. This is the education that you need to have to give them to be able to justify their budget, right? $40,000 is a ton of money. It just isn't going to get you the kitchen scope that you are wanting. And I don't know in what world it would ultimately. Pull and replace, new everything. And then custom is a complete, total regut of the spaces. This is also a really wonderful, wonderful feature. We'll start with Zillow. Now, as a broker, Zillow is the bane of my existence, but as a designer, I love it. Before I go to a first meeting or do a qualifying call, I will always Zillow the house. And the reason I do that is because I want to educate myself on when a client bought a home, what they bought it for, and, basically what the comps are in the house, in the neighborhood, so that we can see they have a ton of equity in this house. If they tell me they want to live here for the next 15 years, I mean, go balls to the wall, invest in this house, right? We don't know what in 10 years it will be. I find that the Zillow can be a really, really great resource. If the Zillow information doesn't have up to date, then you would go to the county assessor's page, and it's all public knowledge, but the county assessor's page allows you to research the property. You can actually see the site plan, but you also can understand the house value, the assessed value, and you can see ultimately what they paid for it and in what year. So if it's a brand new home that someone paid for the house and they're going to invest in this house because it's their forever home, that's good to know, right? Because if they bought at the top of the market and comps aren't going to support a $500,000 kitchen, they need to know that they're going to live there for a long time and not get an ROI until that's the case. So, and then the second option that I really like is this Zonda Media. They put out a cost versus value, and this is a really great data analysis of job costs broken down to city, region, and then national averages. So you can see where it lives next to national averages. So when you go on cost versus value on Zonda Media, you can go in and say, in Denver, where I am, a remodel mid-range, the job cost is around X amount of money. From a resale value, that may not be as applicable to them, but that job cost is being pulled from permits, is being pulled from a lot of analysis and data that they came across. And so that is justifying in 2024, the average job cost for a bathroom remodel mid-range is X amount. And that really is a great resource to show clients as well. Like, this is what we're here doing these days, right? I have a lot of clients that move from out of state, and Denver can be an expensive place to remodel, whereas in Texas or Kansas, labor costs are lower. And so it can be a huge shock to a client who has just moved to a new neighborhood or a new area and assume because they did a kitchen remodel at their old house for X amount, it's not applicable to what we have here, right? So from the standpoint of Denver, you can go through and look at what an average job cost is. And clients have this is a free research report online. If you Google cost versus value, Zonda Media, you can type in your city and you can get all of this information. And it's a wonderful, wonderful resource. Okay, so let's go into talking a little bit about some of the verbiage I like to use when we talk about budget. So with budget, I don't love the word budget. I find it to be kind of curse and aggressive and sharp. I love the word investment. I think investment comes across as professional. It comes across as, it's a way for you to say, what is the investment amount you're comfortable with spending? Not what is your budget, right? The investment, they're investing in their home. They need to be reminded of that. It's a huge investment. And so when you say investment, it almost, like I said, aligns you with helping them invest in their home. Can you share the investment amount you feel comfortable with spending? The word discount. Don't love the word discount when it comes to budgets. I like price improvement. I like consideration. So let's see if we can get a price consideration on this faucet or a price improvement on this faucet. It's a great way to not only approach it with a client, but also with your trades if they're open to discounted pricing. I just sometimes think the discounted word, along with the word cheap, can be synonymous with perhaps quality issues. And so I think price improvement is more of, this is the same faucet, same quality, it's just a price difference. Like I had said, cheaper, I like to use the word cost effective. I think cheaper can sometimes be synonymous with quality issues. So we're going to go with the cheaper wood. Well, that sounds like it's not going to be good quality. I like to use cost effective in ways like there could be more cost effective options. This is a beautiful Zalige handmade tile from Italy. I don't think this is in your budget, but there could be more cost effective options if we did more of a porcelain or ceramic that is emulating that. we just don't want to use the word cheaper. I think it diminishes what you are providing to the project when it comes to materials. And so when you can say cost effective, it's just a nicer way to say that. And then when we say drop the price. So, I like the phrase value engineer. So can we value engineer this down a little bit? Talking to a contractor, is there a way to value engineer this? We don't want to necessarily just come off as, hey, I need this price lower. We need to drop the price. Value engineer is a very much a construction term, verbiage, lingo that contractors use on a day-to-day basis. And so for us to be able to kind of use that, it just shows that one, we are educated potentially in construction, but at the same point, we don't want to take away from the quality or devalue what they are bringing to the table when it comes to what, a contractor has. Hey, I need to drop the price, but I want the same amount of stuff. We need to value engineer scope, material, budget. All right. That is it for me. I thank you for all of your time to be here. I wanted to open up the board for questions. I know that there was a lot going through the chat as I was looking to the side. So I wanted to give enough time for that because I think there's a lot of you, which is amazing. And I want to be able to facilitate as many questions as I can about this topic.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for
You're
such
welcome.
a wonderful presentation, a lot of actionable tips. I'm dropping in the chat now a survey for Elizabeth. So please, if you enjoyed today's presentation, please click that link. It takes 3 minutes to give Elizabeth your feedback. We would really appreciate it. Perfect. So with that, we are going to get into some Q&A.
Great.
Our first question is, as someone newer to the industry, I have a hard time knowing how much something might cost. Is there a good way to learn or to guess how much something might be? The percentages in the budget exercise were helpful.
What I would say is, if you have a contractor that you have a really wonderful relationship with, you could always say, can I take you to lunch? And can we talk through, what a small, medium, and kitchen might cost? I also think construction education for a designer will always help you understand what things cost when it comes to bringing a project to fruition. So if you have a little construction knowledge as you're designing a space and you say, well, I can't move that toilet because I know it's going to be a big expense because it's going to tie into this, that, and the other. That really helps you stay on track when you're trying to give estimates. But I think working with a contractor and really trying to get them to give you some insight can be incredibly helpful. I also think, though, that cost versus value tool is great. As you start to get into this industry, you will start to learn these numbers and you will feel more comfortable providing estimates. But I think tagging up with a contractor and getting their insight even as you're on a project, a current project, you will learn what things cost.
Perfect. Thank you for that insight. Our next question is, do you have suggested ways to introduce the value of starting an interior designer on the project sooner than later?
Meaning what? So like,
I'm guessing not bringing in a designer later on in the project, maybe trying to pitch having an interior designer at the beginning or concept phases.
Yeah, I would say, as a kitchen and bath designer primarily, I am the first person on the job site. When contractors go in, if they don't know what they're doing when it comes to the design, is the sink moving? Is that wall coming down? How do you know where the fridge is going to be? They don't know that. And so they can't give realistic estimates. It's not, I call it a WAG, a wild ass guess, right? They're sitting there and they're going, well, I think this would cost us if this, that, and the other. So my contractors have now, when they get a lead, they say, you need to talk to Elizabeth first. I need a blueprint to be able to bid it. And so that really emphasizes how important it is to get a design going from the beginning and then to be able to hand off a tangible blueprint for contractors to bid, multiple bids at that.
Perfect. I think that's a great answer. Our next question is, what's the biggest mistake designers tend to make when bringing up budget to clients? What's like a big no-no or maybe a good way to set a negative tone? You gave us so many positive ways to discuss it.
I think I think talking about budget first and foremost is a no. I don't think you need to know the budget until you know the information to be able to advise on their budget, right? So I ask a lot of questions at my first meetings. Tell me about the home. How long have you lived here? Show me the space. What do you like? What don't you like about the kitchen? What do you want to do to the kitchen? What doesn't work in your kitchen? Oh, show me some pictures. Yes, I'd love to see your aunt's kitchen. All these things will lead up to your budget conversation, which should be towards the end because you don't know what they want to do. So how do you advise on if a budget is realistic or not? So I think talking about budget towards the end of a meet and greet or a first consultation is the most important. I think another no-no would be just outright asking for the budget or just honestly feeling uncomfortable asking for it. It makes everybody uncomfortable. I think having a very conversational way to approach it, it just doesn't feel as threatening. And money makes you vulnerable. And when you can come in a very conversational, I'm here to help you. If you tell me your investment amount, I can design to that investment amount. So if you feel comfortable with sharing, I can help you in that. That feels very conversational versus, well, what do you think you want to spend on this? What's your budget? That would be my suggestion.
That's perfect. And I think it's really in the designer's hands of setting the tone. How do
Yes.
we want this to be received? So
Yep.
I love that. Um, Someone asked, how do you handle contingency funds within your client's budget? In the exercise, you did put, I think, 10 to 15%.
Yep.
Is that standard for you?
That is what I suggest. I'm not controlling their budget in regards to their finances. I don't have access to their bank accounts or their home equity loan, but these are suggestions that I'm making to them. So if they tell me that, they have $200,000 or $100,000 to invest on this, I usually will say, I think you should have about 10,000 of a contingency fund in there. That's a suggestion. I can't manage that. But at the end of the day, they will be very happy that they had that because things do arise. They've never been slab shopping before and they fall in love with something. I had a client the other day, they were like, I'm not going to care about countertops. I'll just pick whatever. We hear that often. And then we go shopping and we see the giant slabs and they're just stunning. And she fell in love and she said, well, I guess my kid doesn't need to go to college, like in a joking manner. But to me, it's like, you have to prioritize what you invest in. And she was really happy that we had a contingency fund for her to be able to take a little bit out of that. Once you open walls, you just have no idea what you're going to find. So I really do try to educate that. Don't tell me down to the nickel what you want to spend. And if you do, then let's drop back and say we actually have 90,000 to work with, or we have, 200 instead of 220 to work with so that you have a little bit of a slush fund.
Perfect. I think that's wonderful. As we have a lot more questions flooding in, I just want to remind everyone to please use the Q&A. Questions do get lost in the chat pretty easily. So if you can put them in the Q&A box at the bottom or top of your screen, that'd be really helpful. Thank you so much. Our next question is, how do you estimate design fees for your remodels?
Well, everybody is different and everybody's business models are different. I work on an hourly basis, and so I use similar projects with similar scopes of work, and I'll go back and see what my design hours were for that. But because I've been doing this for long, I can usually gauge what I think I can do a project in. But I also have an extensive background in construction, so I know what it would take to bring this project to fruition when it comes to their costs. So I would say you have to find a business model that works best for you. If you are a fixed price, if you are a cost plus, whatever that looks like for you, you have to figure out what you're comfortable with investing in the time. I mean, it is time consuming for me to work on an hourly basis, and there are pros and cons to it, but that's just worked for me for years.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Kind of in that same vein, someone asked, are your budget estimates including labor or just products like cabinets, appliances, and finishes?
I'm just doing material selections. So I'm not including labor in mine. My contractors are including that. I'm doing more finished, like finished materials. So decorative lighting, decorative plumbing fixtures, sometimes flooring, sometimes not. Cabinets, countertops usually come from my fabricator, but I'll select them. So it kind of depends. And again, it really depends on the contractor you're working with too. If you find a great contractor and he wants you to buy everything and he just wants to charge labor and you feel comfortable with that, do it. I have other contractors that are like, I want to buy everything. I take liability, I take ownership of it. Everything goes through me and I charge a 20% markup. on it. So you have to align with a contractor that you feel comfortable with and how their business model aligns with yours.
Perfect. Thank you for that insight. Um, our next question is, do you send out a client questionnaire or intake form to ask basic questions like their investment amount? Um, or do you prefer speaking about this on a call?
I prefer doing it on a call. I think it's very informal and a kind of a scapegoat to put it in a questionnaire. I think questionnaires, depending on how you run your business, if you want to send out a preliminary questionnaire, it should be fun for someone to fill out, right? These are pictures I like. These are the finishes I like. It shouldn't then start to be like, but then what is your budget? What is your budget? I think it should be a way that clients can get excited to meet you or talk to you on the phone. And then you have that conversation face to face or on the phone so that they can hear your tone and your inflection when you talk about budget. Again, it is not a threatening thing. It is for us to help. So sometimes if it's just on paper, it comes across as, well, I need to know your budget so that I can decide if I want to work with you kind of thing.
I love that. Just facing it head on,
Yeah.
just like any other part
Yep.
of that intake process.
Yes.
I love that. Our next question is, just this week I got a labor quote for $109,000, previously quoted 3 months ago at 75K. How do you approach this type of change?
Well, I would want to know more details about that because in a 3 month span, that's an insane increase. I don't know if the scope changed and that was the increase. But I could understand in 6 months to a year, which is why a lot of contractors put 30 days on their estimates because prices do change and, within $10,000 perhaps. But I haven't seen that much of an increase since COVID. But how do I approach that? I approach it with the contractor first. Unless a client has come to you with that, I would talk to the contractor about what that looked like. And I would want him to show me, is it because you forgot to include things in the first bid and now 3 months later you're like, oh, I didn't see that we had to do this in the bid or in the blueprints. Now I'm adding it to this. So did the scope change? But that seems significant, a significant increase in 3 months.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our next question from Leslie is regarding clients who ask about specific cost per square foot. How should that be included in quotes? Is it better to give an overall price point based off of estimated square footage? I guess the question is, how are we dealing with customers who really want those nitty-gritty numbers versus a larger estimate?
Well, I would say I never, ever, ever price a remodel price per square foot. It's not applicable because an older home will have a lot more issues than a newly built home that is built to code these days. You're not going to open up a wall in a brand new home and find plumbing tied together with string. I did on a house that was 100+ years old, right? So you would never do price per square foot when it comes to remodel projects. I think you can give round numbers and you can also give really big estimates. I think your kitchen could be between 100 and 200,000. I think your kitchen could be 150 to 200,000. If they want that line item, then they need to invest in the design first because ultimately you don't know what you're bidding until you have everything in order. And so that's kind of how I would address that. Only price
Perfect.
per square foot is really for new build. It's not for remodels and retrofits.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then just a reminder, because I'm seeing a lot of questions about this in the chat,
Yeah.
this will be available online for
Mm.
rewatch tomorrow at nkba.org. Everyone will see an email at the end of the presentation. And also, I'm seeing some questions regarding these PowerPoint slides. I'm sure Elizabeth would be happy to
Yep.
provide a PDF so you guys can
Yep.
comb through, see all of these amazing examples that you provided. So you'll receive that all today by 5 p.m. Eastern time, okay?
Yes.
Um, our next question is, what about if a client has their own contractor but wants you to do the design? Does that impact any of the budgeting for you?
Well, it does, but I like to go into it and set that expectation from the beginning. So when I meet with that client, I'll say, I haven't worked with John before. I'm unfamiliar with how he budgets and what he's estimating projects would cost. So I think it would be great to have a conversation with him. And oftentimes, if they're bringing a contractor to the table, then I would like them present at my measure ups because I would like to talk through with them. One, I like to gauge them and judge them to see if they really are, who they say they are. Because I think if you've done this for long enough, you really can tell if a contractor knows what they're doing and whatnot. And so I like to meet with them before I even design to make sure we're on the same page. But it's very hard. I have a project here, and we had some contractors that were going to fly in to do the project here, and the client was going to fly them in. And where they do remodels is very different than in Denver. And so what they were estimating the price to be is what they thought it would be back in Pennsylvania. And in Denver, it's very different. And so I think we have to take that into account when we work with new people, is that everybody works differently. It's just a matter of setting that expectation from the beginning with a client to say, I've never worked with John before. I'm excited to work with him and get to know him. I would really love him to be present at my measure up so we can talk through things and understand who's buying what or who's responsible for what, so that we can make your job as smooth as possible.
Perfect.
Yeah.
We're going to keep going right up until 1 p.m. if that's all right with you, Elizabeth. We do
Of
have a few
course.
more questions.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Chelsea asked, how early in the process should she engage trades to help determine labor costs? There seems to be a constant struggle. Trades can't effectively bid a project without a clear scope, but that is difficult to build without insights into cost of work.
Well, I think it depends if she's the general contractor or if she's working with a general contractor. I mean, if you're the general contractor and you have your trades that you work with on a continuous basis, they will continue to get work from you. So they should be very willing to come and give you pricing. But at the same point, they need blueprints to create that. So oftentimes I will create my blueprint and have my contractor, provide a bid. A rough estimate is the way that we work together. And he will create a rough estimate. And if we're in that ballpark of a budget for a client, then we do trade walkthroughs and whatnot. But ultimately, if I have a really significant question about plumbing, like, hey, can I move this stack that's right in the middle in this post? I will engage with my favorite plumber, and he is great because I give him a ton of work. I'll shoot him a picture and say, hey, Chris, I'm on this job in this basement. I really want to move this. Is that possible? So you as a designer, building relationships with trade professionals can be incredibly impactful for you learning on a job site, but just having that resource to say, like, I have a team behind me that can really help me facilitate this project.
That's perfect. Thank you. Andy asks, I think a lot of people know how much they want to spend, but don't always want to share this, either because they don't trust you yet or they're shopping around for the lowest price.
Yes.
How do you handle potential clients like this?
Well, I address it by saying, if they want to share a very low number with me, then I will say that's a great amount of money. It's a lot of money. Thank you for sharing. I think for that budget, we could probably just keep everything in this kitchen in the same place and not do what you want to do. And then they'll say, well, I want to do all of that. I want to move my sink. I want to move my stove. And then you can say, well, I did a project that was similar, and we came in around 150. How do you feel about that? And that gets them talking, right? Okay, well, if another person did that, and even if they didn't, and you just want to say it so it doesn't sound as threatening, that's okay too. But you can say, they may start talking and saying, yeah, actually, okay, fine, we can probably spend a little more. But oftentimes clients, 90% of the time, will not give you their real budget. So they already have a contingency fund that they've put in place that they know they're going to maybe go over, or they're going to like something and want to spend a little bit more.
Perfect. I think we have time for two final questions.
Okay.
If you guys have any other questions for Elizabeth, I will go ahead and put an email in the chat in just a minute, and you can send those questions to that email, and Elizabeth will be happy to answer post-broadcast. With that being said, so the next question is from Katie. Okay. Elizabeth, you charge an hourly fee. Do you do your kitchen design plans and material selections prior to putting an estimate together? Basically, do you get paid for your design time before you put the estimate together?
Do I get paid? So the way that I work as a designer with my hourly is I put an estimate together after our first meeting, but my first meeting with them is not a billable. It's a meet and greet. If you really want to get into how I work, it's a meet and greet, and I tell them up front, we will not be sharing ideas. I will not be providing any insight into design ideas for you. But what I would want to do is make sure that we're a good fit working together, right? This is a long, arduous process. It can be very stressful. I want to make sure that we are a good fit, that you're a good fit for me as a client, and I'm a good fit for you as a designer. But I won't be sharing any design ideas at that meeting. Then once I meet with them and I discuss their scope of work and I discuss their budget and their budget is realistic for what they want to do, then I go home and I create an estimate with hourly ranges. So I'll say, I think this kitchen will take me 20 to 30 hours to design. And I break it into two phases. I break it into feasibility and functionality and material selection. Because ultimately, I can make any functional kitchen pretty. I can't make every pretty kitchen functional, right? And so if I can make that kitchen super functional, then I can bring in the materials to add it and make it really beautiful. So I want to prioritize functionality and feasibility first. And so once I have that blueprint and I have placeholders for materials, hey, based on what we talked about, you really wanted the look of this and you wanted rift cut, white oak cabinets and this and this and that. That's what my 3Ds will look like. That's what I will estimate in there. And then oftentimes we'll create allowances. Here's your allowance for spending on cabinets. And then we'll go into material phase. Because then if we spend more on countertops and we spend more than our allowance, that bottom line is going to increase. So then where could we take off a little, like the backsplash, let's say, to offset that cost? If that makes sense.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. Yes. And our final question today, you've discussed a lot about, discussing budget up front, those initial conversations. Have you ever had to have a conversation about budget misalignment mid-project? If so, how do you approach that kind of conversation? Is there a point where you should walk away, or how do you remedy and get everyone back on track?
Well, I often think that that happens because expectations aren't set up front, and clients aren't educated throughout the milestones of the project, right? A client gets into a project and they're like, oh my gosh, well, while you're here, let's actually do the stairs in hardwood. And also, oh, while you're here, let's do this. And they're not educated along the way that that's going to impact their budget, that's going to impact their time frame. It's going to take longer. And then all of a sudden, midway through, they're like, what am I getting this huge change order for? This is so expensive. Oh my gosh. So they need to be educated along the way at every milestone, to be able to address these things so that doesn't happen, because then you start to get into a negative light with your client and it just doesn't end well. So if you can be very transparent from the beginning, oh, you want to add the stairs? That's like $200, $250 a tread, and you have 14 of them. That's going to be expensive. And ultimately, they would then need to make that decision if they're willing to spend it or not. It's just not a surprise. And that's where you can avoid that.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Elizabeth, for
You're welcome.
sharing all of this information. I feel like we've all learned something and we'll be taking away a lot of great, useful
Great.
expertise. So before we leave for today, I'd like to give you the floor to give us any of your final thoughts or tips or just anything that you have going on and you'd like to share with our audience.
I would just say, don't make budget uncomfortable. It shouldn't be. You are there to help. They have hired you as a designer to help bring their dream kitchen to life. And so budget is just as important as knowing their measurements, knowing their aesthetic. And I just feel like the people who are uncomfortable talking about budget is more because of their internal limiting beliefs about budget. If they can shift that mindset and they can look at it from a standpoint of, I am here to help you. If you share your budget, I can design to that budget. If you share your investment with me, then I can at least be an advocate for you as we go through this process. And I think it will make it a lot more conversational and a lot more approachable. And it puts you in this, you're an advisor for them and they'll trust you and they start to build that relationship with you, which is how you want with your clients, right? Because it's very stressful and they're going to come to you with God knows what stresses they're going through that day, but they feel comfortable doing that because you've set those expectations from the beginning. So just don't be scared to talk about budget. It is not a scary thing. It might be a vulnerable thing, but if you approach it from the standpoint of, I'm here to help you, it can be hugely beneficial for everyone. So
That's amazing. Thank you. I know our designers will go forward and feel more comfortable having these
I hope so.
conversations because they don't have to be tough or
No.
uncomfortable. Not at all. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, everyone, you will receive the links to give feedback to Elizabeth, as well
Great.
as where to watch this presentation again, as well as the PDF for this presentation. So be on the lookout for that later today. You'll receive all those wonderful resources. So
Wonderful.
Thank you again, Elizabeth, for your time. And
Thank
thank you
you.
again to our wonderful audience.
Yes, thank
Uh,
you so
with,
much.
with that, until next time, I hope everyone has a great day.
Awesome.
Bye,
Bye, guys.
everybody.
Thank you.